Hi, here is Liprandi, and this, of course, is Skeletor, Lord of Destruction. Created by Mattel back in 1982, he was the main villain in the old Masters of the Universe toy line. If you want to see a review of He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe, you can watch the one that we've made a few months ago, which is linked in the description to this video. When Mark Taylor came up with the He-Man concept, Mattel also gave him the job of creating an enemy for our new hero. And if Conan might have been inspiration for He-Man, probably in order to create Skeletor, Mark Taylor took inspiration from Tulsa Doom, Conan's enemy, as he appeared in the old comic books published by Marvel back in the 70s. Well, Tulsa Doom was a big man with muscles and a skull instead of his head. So in the first concept, our enemy was a big man with long arms, muscles, a skull, head, and a long beard. Such figure has never been produced until the recent Masters of the Universe Classics toy line, where he's been named Demon Man. But probably back in the 80s, such concept has been turned into the one of Beastmen, with the same long arms and similar armor on their biceps. Then finally Taylor designed Skeletor as we all know him. So the great sculptor Anthony Guerrero, who had already created a concept sculpt for He-Man which was great, created a wonderful but rough, non-articulated concept sculpt for Skeletor. It was very similar to the final production toy, but it had some differences. It had a bigger hood and a smaller face, and the whole toy was a little bit creepier. We can still see a picture of it on the internet, and it's wonderful. And this is the final action figure they came up with, Skeletor, Lord of Destruction. He looks similar to He-Man, but actually the only parts they have in common are the chest piece and the pelvis, while their arms and legs and heads are completely different. Skeletor's arms and legs are slightly less muscular than He-Man's ones, and they've got some monstrous details. He's got fins on his forearms and claws on his fingers. And then there are these weird feet. We will never know if these were supposed to be boots with fur and claws, or maybe Skeletor's bare feet, or only shin guards. This one that I've got in my hand is the first version ever that came out of Skeletor, and it's called Half Boot Skeletor because of these weird paint applications on his legs. This blue paint application, or deep purple paint application, has been given only on the front of his legs and not on the back, so we can guess these were supposed to be shin guards maybe, but I think that the sculptor did not talk too much with the guy who decided how to paint Skeletor. When a toy line becomes so popular as the Masters of the Universe were, it might happen that the same figure will be produced all over the world in many different countries, different factories, and for a long period of time, so you can find different versions or variants for the same figure. So I've got here a later version of Skeletor, and we can notice that their legs are different, their feet are completely different. They've given Skeletor bigger feet in order to make him stand more easily, and also this blue paint application has been given all around the leg and not only on the front like it was on the half boots variant. Then one other major difference between the half boots Skeletor and the other variants is the head. It was quite common back in the 80s that the action figures in the first waves came with soft, hollowed-out rubber heads. Many think that it was in order to lower down the production costs, but it was not. These soft rubber heads were much more detailed than the hard ones. This soft rubber kept details much better than the hard plastic. So, this soft head is slightly bigger than the hard one, and even the paint applications on Half Boots Skeletor on his face are much better than the later versions. On his face we will find orange highlights and light green highlights, light blue highlights, and deep blue eye sockets with an eerie red glow inside. It's weird, but it looks cool. While in the later versions His face has been simplified a little bit. We can only find green and yellow, and deep blue eye sockets with black details. Also, Skeletor's accessories were different from He-Man's ones. He came with the famous Havoc staff, which is this cool stuff with a skull on top of it. Looks really cool and mean. Come on, focus please. Here it is. Nice. And of course he's got a belt and this armor with crossbones because Skeletor is mean. And of course he came with the other half of the power sword, which is different from He-Man's one. They are symmetrical, and that's because they needed to merge together in order to form the power sword. And that's because of the story, because once Mattel had an action figure for Skeletor, they needed a story for Skeletor, and since the toys came out way before Filmations was involved into the Masters of the Universe myth, Skeletor as he was born was quite different from the evil sorcerer we all know from the TV show. Skeletor was only one of an entire kind of people like him. During the Great Wars, a hole was opened between Skeletor's dimension and one of Eternia. And Skeletor was thrown to Eternia. Now he wants to get the two halves of the Power Sword in order to get the mighty powers of Castle Grayskull and reopen such hole between the dimensions and allow his people to come and conquer Eternia. But of course He-Man and the Masters of the Universe will never let this happen. Since in the first mini-comic that came with He-Man, Skeletor was defeated, the story we find with him is titled The Vengeance of Skeletor, although later versions of the same figure can be found with a different mini-comic which was more faithful to the Filmation's continuity. By the way, in The Vengeance of Skeletor, he calls a couple of his evil friends. He calls Merman and Evil Beastman in order to prepare an ambush for He-Man. But when he arrives, they try to capture him and to kill him. But now, thanks to the help of He-Man's friends Teela and Stratos the Winged Man, our heroes will be able to defeat Skeletor once again. And so, the Lord of Destruction turned out to be at least as cool as the most powerful man in the universe himself. So the Masters of the Universe toy line were a huge, enormous success. And even a theatrical movie came out in 1987 about these characters. The movie was awful, but Frank Langella's performance as Skeletor was very good and enjoyable. Now, I hope this whole story was not too boring, and if you liked this video, please share it and subscribe. Ciao!